Hello, I'm guessing that you're here today either because you are a person with disability, you live, work, or study with persons with disability, or like me, you just simply want to diversify your life and learn more about disabilities and how you can influence the world around you. So, I want to share with you that I have spent a large portion of my life living with persons with disabilities. Yeah, I started out as a SPED teacher teaching students in mainstream classrooms. Then I moved to children's hospitals administering psychosocial evaluations to children and teens suspected of disabilities. And 15 years ago, I formed a social skills training program for autism, learning disability, and Asperger's syndrome, ADHD. And these kids and teens that I work with, well, they started growing up. And in the last 5 years, I found myself journeying with them as they entered college and started to work. So currently, I help people prepare for work through another program that my colleagues and I have developed called STEPS. And I also work part-time in the university helping faculty, students, and staff with their mental health problems, as well as, recently conducting research on needs of college students with psychosocial disability. So it's been quite a journey for me. Now, if you want to know how to be supportive of individuals with disability, how to be an ally, and build creative, inclusive spaces, I'd like to invite you to have a listen to something I would like to share today. Exactly what my goal is. Huh? Okay, so after being invited by Inclusion Philippines, I Initiative Philippines, I prepared this presentation called Safe and Inclusive Spaces for Individuals with Psychosocial Disabilities. And I hope to understand this with you by talking about mental health first and its relation to psychosocial disabilities, some approaches that we have in the Philippines that address psychosocial disabilities, and what it takes to create safe and inclusive environments. Yeah. Let's begin. Huh? So let's start first with mental health. What is mental health? Well, mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act, and it also helps determine how we address stress, relate to others, and make healthy choices. So as you can see, mental health is important at every stage of life, from childhood, adolescence, through adulthood. Now, when people experiencing extreme problems now with their thoughts, their emotions, and behavior, and this impact on how they cope with life, it's possible that we are experiencing mental health problems. These can vary, from worries, frustrations, and insecurities to lifelong serious problems like depression, anxiety disorder, and schizophrenia. And when these problems are labeled as mental illness or psychosocial disabilities, they are classified, they are no longer a mental health problem, but yes, a psychosocial disability, and classified as a disability because of the health problem that significantly affects how a person feels, thinks, behaves, and interacts with the people around them. Most of psychosocial disabilities, if not attended to, can cause great suffering to those experiencing them, not only them, but their families and friends. So one common, of the mental illnesses is anxiety and depressive disorder. Yan. The people that experience these, unlike others, are not just feeling tension and fear and sadness, but it's so disturbing and overwhelming that they have problems coping with day-to-day activities such as work, school, leisure time, making relationships. And to the most extremes, They even could have difficulty getting out of bed, taking care of themselves. People with certain types of anxiety disorders, well, they may be able to not able to leave the house, or may have compulsions that interfere with the quality of life, like the one in the picture, hand washing, which is often talked about. And not so common naman are those mental illnesses that involve psychosis. Now, these include schizophrenia, bipolar mood disorder. It's where people experience an acute episode of psychosis that you lose touch of reality. You might have hallucinations and delusions, and you kind of perceive the world differently from normal. The other group of people with psychosocial disabilities are those with neurodevelopmental problems, no? Brain-based problems too, that could be identified as autism, learning disability, ADHD, and the problems in the brain where they affect attention, cognitions, no? Flexibility of thought, social skills, and also their mood, no? Interferes with how they learn or how they work. We all know in the profession that majority of the people who experience mental illness can naman get over them, no? And learn to live with them, especially if they get help early on. Or in my discovery, when kids learn their passion, stick with their passion, and focus also on their strengths, no? They helps them cope with the struggles of life. Now, how serious is the mental health problem? Well, the World Health Organization reports that mental and behavioral disorders account for 14% of the global burden of disease. That's 450 million people suffering from psychosocial problems. Quite a lot, no? It doesn't sound like mental health illness is a rare thing. In fact, in the Philippines, our country, there is a reported 6 million Filipinos who are estimated to live with depression and anxiety, at making it the third most common disability in our country. And it's probable that people with depression and anxiety will experience hopelessness, helplessness, and resort to suicide as a solution, such that in 2000 to 2012, the World Health Organization reported 2,000 cases of suicide. No? Involved here are people ages 15 to 29. Not so very old, actually young. In fact, suicidal ideation, no, contemplating ending your life, can even occur as early as 13 years of age. Well, despite the figures, no, in the actual situation, the government is only spending 3 to 5% of total health expenditures on mental health. Aside from this, there is a lack of health professionals working in the mental health sector. In the past 2-3 years, only around 500 psychiatrists have been registered and 1,400 psychologists. This gives an approximate ratio of 1 psychologist to 80,000 Filipinos. That's a big burden, no, for mental health professionals to address. Now, it's not only the barrier of low manpower, resources. There's also Filipino attitude that we have to address. No? According to the study made by Martinez and his colleagues in 2020, well, Filipinos across the world have general reluctance and unfavorable attitude towards formal help seeking, despite the high rates of psychological distress. Why? Because they prefer seeking help from family or close friends. Aside from this, there's still that ongoing self and social stigma attached to mental disorder that keeps them from obtaining the help that they need. Until now, you might probably hear people saying, oh, wala lang yan. No? Tulog ka lang, mawawala yan. Or probably saying, mental health, that's crazy. That's a crazy brain. So can't have that. Yeah. So all of these beliefs or are barriers for helping people with mental disabilities. Now, what has been the approach used in the Philippines for mental health? Well, common one is the supernatural approaches, which started maybe early in our history. And mental health here is attributed to possessions by evil spirits or displeasing gods or influence of the planets and the moon, no? Or maybe a curse. And Filipinos would maybe visit an albularyo for a healing ritual or taking some potions, as we might say, or maybe approach a priest for prayers and exorcism. The second approach that's also present in our society is the somatogenic approach. This approach has started probably when the Americans came and they established hospitals and sanitariums where they treat the individual that they feel is sick. Unfortunately, this espoused segregation. They would take the individual away from society, in thinking to protect society, right? And treat them with medication and sometimes some inhumane procedures, and which definitely developed a lot of inequality for this marginalized group. This was also followed by the psychogenic approaches, not too late after, maybe in the 40s, 50s, where mental health is considered to be a problem that results from stressful experiences, traumatic experiences, and they could lead to maladaptive perceptions and learned associations. That's why in the 1950s, the Philippine Mental Health Association was established, where psychiatrists, psychologists worked together for client intervention. Now, the psychogenic and the somatogenic approaches, they are all falling in the medical model, and nothing is really wrong with that because it helps us identify, diba, who needs help and what kind of help. Unfortunately, that alone is not the only solution. No? Why? Because by doing so, you sort of espouse stigma, no? And discrimination. Nowadays, we are more inclined to incorporating the social model. The social model focuses on the interaction, right, of the impairment with the environment and looks at the barriers in the environment that hinder full and effective participation. Okay. The social model inclusion is one type of ideology that can espouse this social model, as a way to deal with the disabilities. Inclusion's objective actually is to embrace everyone regardless of race, age, gender, disability, religious, cultural beliefs, and sexual orientation. When we have true inclusion, it means we're trying our best to remove the barriers of discrimination and intolerance. Okay, so let's move on to this inclusion. How does one create inclusive environments to help individuals with special needs? Since most of my experience is coming from education, I'm going to be sharing with you in the next few minutes some tips on inclusive education. Before that, what do we want? We want to establish what inclusive education is. It is when students with disabilities learn alongside their non-disabled peers in the general education classroom. But more than just putting them together in the same physical environment, it also means providing them the necessary support to level the playing field in learning to reach their goals. No, they have a disadvantage. We want to provide that support that will help level it up, not to give them charitable help, or a head start. And these things can be done by accessibility, which was explained earlier to you by the previous speaker, I suppose, and also reasonable accommodations and safe spaces. Okay. Inclusive education actually supported by a lot of laws. in the Philippines. So we're not missing out on laws. What we're actually missing out is on uh, uh, generalizing these laws into actual action. So in the next few slides, I've decided to share with you 3 areas where inclusion can be espoused. Number 1, of course, is inclusion awareness. Now, it's quite new, so it's important that people learn more about inclusion. And you can do so by checking out websites that are available. Many organizations like Initiative Philippines have created that. In the university, the peers are a good source of information, and there are a lot of organizations that address diversity, inclusion, disabilities, and attending seminars, webinars. At the same time, placing offices in charge of these things where people can come for information and help. Other than that, there are 2 other things I'd like to discuss with you. First is communication and connection. So when a person feels through the language that you use that they're being excluded, this person fails to have this dialogue with you, to be able to understand each other. So the 3 tips that I'd like to share with you are these. Now, first, how we call people with disabilities. We no longer want to use words like disabled person, crippled person, handicapped person. Why? Because it promotes labeling and making that person feel outside of the circle. What we want to do is acknowledge the person first and then add the disability. So as you noticed in the presentation, I'm always trying to use person with a disability or person with a psychosocial disability. Second, this is my pet peeve. Speak directly to the person with disability. When I'm with teachers, people in the community, and a person with disability is with me like a child or an adult, many times the Filipinos will talk to the adult beside them or the professional, asking them the questions that they could have asked the person themselves. Now, it's very important because it acknowledges that they are participating and included. The third would be how we manage our nonverbals, how we look when we're around them. If we're more informed about the differences in their personalities and ways of coping, maybe this will help affect our reactions. And if in case you are truly confused, maybe recognizing it by saying so and asking politely the person about your confusion. How do you want me to call you? Or that behavior, what did that mean? Now, safe spaces and brave spaces, for me, really mean espousing approachability. Yeah. So in the university, we've helped professors deal with the approachability factor by asking them to do a few things, like share with their class at the beginning of the SEM that they can talk to you for any struggles that you have. So you're not using the word disability, so it's social disability, but when you use struggles, it includes that as well, right? Include mental health resources in your syllabi, along with typical academic and tutoring resources. Other things would be probably to share a story about when you needed help while in school. If you feel comfortable, do so in a powerful way to show students that seeking help is a strength. And when you have check-ins, don't just ask about academics, but also ask about their sleep, their exercise, and maybe how they practice self-care. The second thing, we actually have workshops for this, is developing active listening. This is when you help a person open up and feel safe. And you can do this by making sure you are discreet, finding a place to speak that offers the student some privacy. Okay, this increases the likelihood the student will feel comfortable sharing. But do not promise entire confidentiality, because it's possible that at some point you might have to share some of what they share told you to somebody else. Just simply ask permission. But the more important thing is learning how to listen by validating. So saying things like, I can hear what you're saying. It makes sense. Yeah, that sounds difficult. Versus, oh no, that will go away easily. Or like giving them solutions right away. Or saying everybody feels that way. Huh? Second, being felt that you were heard and appreciated is so important. So remembering to say thank you for sharing with me these private things. And lastly, of course, referring to those who could further help the individual. Moving on, we have the most challenging for me now is addressing a right for these students, which is reasonable accommodation in the classroom. So when a student has a disability, he is asked to have a document that supports it from a doctor, and then have a discourse with the professor about changes, adjustments in tasks or in the environment or the way things are done that will all enable this individual to have equal opportunity to participate in a program. So basically, can be categorized into 4 different types. The very common one is time and scheduling, the extension of deadlines and removal of penalties, because this person may have experienced a lot of interruptions in their life, cognitively and emotionally. Then, of course, there is the accommodation of presentation, where a professor might change or add how he presents a lesson using visuals, or maybe staying away from trigger words and ideas. Also, for people with physical disabilities, having a sign language interpreter, and many more. Finally, the response, which is a whole bunch of accommodations that we can explore. This is changes in how a person shows his learning through the responses. It could be how he presents his presentation. If he has social anxiety, presenting it to just 1 or 2 people with the professor, or the entire class versus the entire class. Being in group work and individual work for people with social disabilities. And how they may respond to an assessment. And of course, setting accommodations. There are ways you can change the setting, like change a person's nearness to the information, because that might help someone who's partially blind, or change field work because certain places are not healthy places for this person to be in. Lastly, there's addressing attitude. Okay, so when it comes to attitude, I'm going to share a bit about the attitude that the person with disability needs to attend to. So in my work in adult transition and in colleges, I often find myself having long discussions about disclosure. Why? Because a lot of people with disabilities are not comfortable disclosing nowadays. And these are the reasons that came up in our research. Fear of stigma. They don't want the feeling of being judged. And because if they have been judged and shamed previously, they really have these negative experiences keep them from disclosing. Then there is also the factor of having to disclose it over and over again, because the psychosocial disability is an invisible one, and not everybody understands it right away. In fact, one of our students said, I would prefer, and I didn't have to go through that every time. I need someone. It's just tiring. Like, it's tiring to have to go over it. It's tiring to have to correct misconceptions. It's tiring to have to say that, like, I'm not this thing that's created in your brain just because I said that I am disabled. Now, there are others who would not disclose because they want to have an opportunity to live a normal life, as they would like to call it, and not have to be seen as someone with special needs. Other than that, other people don't disclose because they're not aware that they could, or their disability keeps them from expressing themselves. And in this case, a liaison person or a key person would be very useful. And of course, of these journeys, acceptance may develop, or non-acceptance may develop, denial, and feelings that they are a burden to society. Now, for those who did disclose, which there are a couple few, there were some things that came into play. One is they had to, because of a leave of absence they needed to file or drop. So this one, they had to face it. Others, they did disclose because of the initiative of the professor. And so they felt comfortable disclosing. And for others, more actively, no, they want to build self-awareness and they want to self-advocate for themselves. Other advocacy is like trying to fight stigma. No, they want to develop people's change their beliefs and attitude, and also when they seek the support of others in their peers and wanting to avoid misunderstanding. So here's one student saying, I would say a lot of people consider me intimidating, and mainly only because I have to be, not really because I want to be. That's because, like, I will correct people on my disability and I will say what needs to be said if I want something to happen or need some sort of accommodation. Okay, so last and of all would be changing the attitudes of people in our society. And recently I found this book called Diversify, no, in the internet by June Sartwang, and I found it very helpful because the book talks about 6 degrees of shifts in our behavior patterns that will bring us closer to having a more diverse and integrated social circle. And I would like to share just 4 that are simple, easy to do, and will probably help change us. The first is changing our isms. No? We have so many isms that keep us apart. Ableism, racism, sexism, cis-sexism. Buried so deeply within us that we are unaware of them and their ramifications on ourselves and others. Have you ever questioned your belief in the way you see the world around you? Do you really believe you're doing what you can and being the best that you can be? Well, there's a questionnaire on diversify.org that you can use to help you become more aware of yourself. Second is this one, check your circle. No? Being aware means why not? Look at the people that you associate with, that you befriend, that you hire, or even love. Does the circle need demystifying? Diversifying. No? It's good to challenge yourself and reach out to those beyond it and find common ground with them. And the third, related to that, is create that connection. So maybe reach out and really connect to one person you think is not really like me, might have a lot of differences, but I want to get to know. No? Or maybe affirm that I am actually doing that. Remembering yung kaninang listening, active listening, listening to understand, and being kind will help a long way. And lastly, champion the cause, which is what we are doing now, no? Attending webinars, looking for ideas worth spreading and passing the message on. How can we do this? By donating to charities, which also champion the cause, by questioning policies and procedures in your sphere, in the workplace. Are you recruiting for diversification? And teaching kids too about diversity. Last but not least, very simple, when the pandemic allows it more, travel and experience how other people see the world. This will truly improve how you open up to new experiences, because in the end, what we really need to do is learn how to step out of our comfort zone. This will go a long way in acceptance, tolerance, and inclusion. So this ends my presentation. I know I might have exceeded a few minutes, but I'm very much open to questions and answers in question and answer portion. Again, I would like to thank the organization for allowing me this opportunity to talk about inclusion, a very important topic for us. Thank you.
Ayun. Thank you po, Doc G, for that. For our Q&A portion, this is the first question we have po.
Hello.
And hello po, Doc G. We can hear
Yan.
you po. And
Okay.
ito po yung first question po for you. How can we help people with psychosocial disabilities if they are uncomfortable in disclosing their conditions po?
Okay, that's observations that we have sometimes, no? Well, as like what I was saying in the talk a while ago, maybe the first step is really to look into how approachable you are when you are with people, no? Like I said, be aware of your language, be aware of your behavior, your nonverbals, just to see if talagang you allow this person in a safe space. Other than that, just being yourself, I guess, no? Like we said earlier, not having to be too self-conscious about that person's disability, listening, actively listening. These things, no, they may be small things, but I think help it develop yung safety and comfort that people can will need. The disclosure kasi no is a personal choice. So we just trust that the people we are with will know who's the best person to disclose to. It could not be us, but it could be other people they are with.
Okay po, Miss. Thank you po, Doc G, for that. Yes po. I don't think that we should force people to tell them if they're not okay. I think we need to accept that we can't control how they act, but we can control how we act towards them. I think the next question po is, what are ways we can empower others to show and not be afraid of their disabilities?
Hmm. When I work with kids, no, the best thing that one of the things that I learned about helping kids build their self identity and self esteem is a lot of discussions on strengths. Diba? When you get a person to believe in themselves, to feel comfortable talking about they're interested in, that's the start. No, because when you have that a good esteem, you feel safe, then you will be more willing, diba, to open up and share about weaknesses, and that would probably include, yes, the disability issues that you have, and maybe reaching out to get support.
Ayan, thank you for that, Doc G. Talagang we have to empower each other and
Yes.
really boost our each of our own yung self-confidence and self-esteem in ourselves. So, for the next question, Pops, how can I be more inclusive towards every type of disability?
Oh, wow, that's a big question, no? Every type of disability. Well, the first, I guess, is knowledge, na? Awareness. If you want to be open and you want to make sure that there's no exclusion on your part, right? Or labeling, maybe the first thing you can do is continue to learn more about people. Like the podcast that you have, no? Remembering that everybody has a story, yeah. And when you do that, you think of it that way, then curiosity builds and there's positivity involved. It's not like you burden yourself na naku, alam kong alamin lahat yan to do this. But if you bring in that uh, mindset, yeah, that you want to know, you want to be curious, I think that will be first step, no? First thing. Second, like I said earlier, in one of the things I learned from June Sarpong is checking your isms. Now, these are the things that keep us, I think, no, from taking that brave step into exploring other ideas. So that's very hard to do because we like to believe we don't have any. But actually, it's very unconscious sometimes, na, these isms that we have. So be active about self-assessment. Yeah. And then maybe lastly is act in a group. Yeah, you don't have to do this by yourself. No, it's nice to be around others who have the same values. Then you learn together. Yeah, and when you learn together and you have lots of creative juices going on, I think this person's question about being inclusive to many kinds of disability can also be addressed. Yeah, count on each other too.
Thank you po,
Thank you
Doc
po.
G, for those answers. I think, yeah, it's better to learn as a group because when you lose the fire, somebody can, put that fire back. But when you're
Yeah.
on your own, you have to look for it somewhere that you shouldn't expect to see something in. Okay,
Agreed.
so thank you so much, Doc G, Ate Marge.
Yes, thank you po so much for the time and for answering our questions. We really truly learned so much from you po today.